How did you land such a good first year summer internship?
I essentially scrolled through the job posting to see what are the key terms that they want, and I basically changed my bullet points on my resume to include the keywords. Honestly, the interview was all behaviorals. I went on their website. Every company will have what do we look for, or here's our company values. And so I made sure to have a story, a tell me about a time for every single one of the key values or traits that they have. My thing is I'm a huge people watcher. And while that doesn't sound great, it's good for they just interview 20 candidates. At the end of the day, they don't remember just James, but they remember Karen, the people watcher. When you're labeled, they'll remember you so much better. Going into applying for UI, I probably made a really big mistake. I didn't start case prepping immediately after. I submitted my application, a week went by, and then I get my interview offer, and I get it on a Saturday morning for the Monday morning. I see it, and it's a case interview. I'm you're joking.
Okay, moving on towards your internship experiences.
Yes.
So in first year, you worked at a really good corporate internship for someone in first year.
I was at Lindt Chocolate.
How did you land such a good first year summer internship?
Okay, I think that this is a component of two things. I think the first of which was the intern program itself and how new it was.
Okay.
And the second component was I actually think my resume at that time.
Slay.
This program was really, really new. I was actually the only first year intern that they hired at that time. And I don't know if that was by mistake or
Flex.
all the other interns were fourth year is about to graduate. This would be their full time that they go towards.
Yeah.
Whereas I was frolicking around as a first year. I was just dilly dallying. But I think that at that time that program was really new. That was the second year that they ran it in Canada, and because it was so new, HR at the time didn't know how to do internship recruitment or how to get this out to students. And I remember for me I literally just saw the ad on Google, and I was I like chocolate, I'll just apply. And that's how I initially applied. And because they were just experimenting at that time, with how to hire interns, they only hired interns from TMU and Queen's University, because at that time, the CEO of Lindt, her sons, one went to Queen's and then one went to TMU. And so she only wanted to hire from those two schools because she's oh, my sons go there. It was a pilot program almost as an internship. And she's why don't we just start there? And so because I think I was at Queen's, it really helped me get past the resume screening. Because I think the hardest part of getting an internship in first year is getting an interview.
Yes.
Because most interviews are just behavioral. Just be a good person. If you can get your foot in the door, it really does help. On the second end of my resume, I think one thing that I did then was I essentially scrolled through the job posting to see what are the key terms that they want. And I basically changed my bullet points on my resume to include the keywords. And I think I bypassed there's a lot of machine screening now on the resume. I definitely just I probably got flagged through the machine that she has all the keywords. And what I mean by this is if you go on any job description and you scroll down, you know how there's the whole company intro part, and then it describes how this company is so great, we work with Fortune 500 companies, or what you do. But go to the part of the actual genuine one is the qualifications that you need, and two is the job description, and basically whatever part of the job description that is in bullet points.
Yes.
And in these bullet points, there'll be specific things managing data analytics or something like that. And so I would go back to my resume and change things that I already had on the point. It was still I wasn't falsifying it. I was just changing the wording.
I actually made a video with someone else on this, and she uses the exact same strategy.
Yeah.
She calls it the copy paste.
Okay, I wouldn't go that far.
It was kind of she just copied the keywords and then put it in her own resume, and it got her through the ACT so many times.
Or a really easy way too is normally they'll talk about all the softwares you have to handle.
Yes.
And then choose all the softwares that you do know. There's no way that anyone will know all of these really niche company softwares.
Especially the preferred ones. Preferred, you usually don't know.
There's no way you're gonna know some random a lot of these companies have internal software platforms, right? Yeah. But just take the ones that you do kind of know and then put it in your additional skills.
So you went to Queen's, so already
that kind of helped
beat everyone else who didn't go to Queen's or TMU, and then you had a good resume. But then you still have to do an interview afterwards, right?
Yes. Honestly, the interview was all behaviorals, which made things a lot easier because there was no technical component I needed to do.
Okay.
But Essentially, the way I prepared for it was like any like normal like behavioral interview, like prep a tell me about yourself. I prepped like, oh, what are 3 skills that I have that's relevant to this role?
Yeah.
And then tell me about a time. And then basically what I did was I went on their website. Every company, like companies like hiring portal or website will have like, what do we look for? Or like, here's our company values. And it'd be like leadership, like it'd be problem solving. And so I made sure that to have a story, like a tell me about a time for every single one of the key values or traits that they have.
Damn, that is so smart.
Yeah. And like, for example, like a firm like McKinsey will literally like interview you based off of their like specific points. Like they have like the niche PEI interviews, and like they'll have like 4 traits that they'll ask you, and they'll always ask you one of these 4 questions. And like I think most companies are very similar to that. Like if a company values like leadership, have a story to talk about leadership. If a company values like working with different people, have like a story about working with different people, but also like managing conflict with different people.
And the reason why that's so helpful is because when you're doing an interview, your interviewer probably has like a separate screen open with like a Microsoft Word document with like essentially like a rubric or like a judging criteria. And there's probably a box that matches each of those values. And they're probably going to give you like a score or at least some notes. So if you tick all the boxes, then
they're going to hire you. Yeah. So like, I think that's essentially how it works. Like, do you tick off the box? And I think like beyond that, it's just like having a really like niche, like differentiation point. Like, I think one thing that always really helps me during interviews is like looking at myself, like what do I think is like my biggest strength? And then like try to make that like abundantly clear during your actual actual interview.
So for example, what are your
Honestly, that's a little bit of a tougher question. Like I think one thing I like to do is
too many.
I think I no. Like I think I like for this is like very like niche, and I don't think it's always applicable, but I think I'm quite like I like to dilly-dally a lot. And so I think I'm a more whimsical person. And so during my interviews, I always try to like crack like a really like strange, either like mention something like really relatable that's like slightly strange, if you will, that like the interviewer can relate to, and then they'll remember you like that.
Oh, do you do it through like deep like LinkedIn stalking to see who they are, what they like? And
no, just like things that like anyone can relate to. Like for example, whenever I talk about like tell me about yourself, like why do you want to work for this firm? I always talk about how like I really like people, because every firm will like be like it's the people that matter. My thing is like, oh, I'm a huge people watcher. Like I like to go to like, and what I mean by this, like, oh, I would be like, oh, I like to go to like Starbucks to do work, and like I don't really do work. Instead, I just like watch people, which is something I actually do, but everyone actually does this a little bit, is what I've learned.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell me that you don't like just daze off and stare at what people are doing.
Especially if they're like spilling tea. Like what are they talking about over there?
Yeah, like you're always like slightly curious about other people. And so like just like say something that's like slightly relatable to the interviewer, that they'll be like, oh yeah, like Karen's the people watcher. And like while that doesn't sound great, it's good for like they just interview 20 candidates. At the end of the day, they don't remember just James, but they remember Karen, the people watcher. They'll be able to recall you much more better. Your label, like it's literally like it helps a lot.
Literally build a customer persona for yourself.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit strange, but it really does help, because like when you're labeled, they'll remember you so much better than like the 30 other people that they interviewed.
Right. So how do you like build a label for yourself?
Think about like you as a person. Like maybe just take out a sheet of paper and write down like all of your niche character traits, really common habits that you have. What do you think makes you stand out? Like if you think about like every other person that could be applying to this job, what is one thing that you are very like distinctively different from everyone else for? Like for example, when I was doing consulting, like my niche like differentiator is like I've done a lot of like people work. So like as in like did a lot of consumer goods work, I did human capital consulting. Like these are all like things that make me like I can say that probably not as many people have like that specific experience or like that specific route relative to me, and then try to really hone in on those differentiators that you have relative to everyone else, and that will help you build the specific profile. But like it's also like simple things of like you play a sport, it'd be great to be like Gary the golfer, and they'll remember you like that. And like you really like hone into a specific like sport or story that you have. And so for me, that's what I did.
And make sure it matches with your first name. So
no, like, it doesn't have to.
It's like a customer persona, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. What is your advice to first year students who want to land a good internship?
Yeah, that's a really big question. I think I'm going to go with quality and quantity as the 2 methods. I opted more so for the first one, which is I went for quality over quantity. But another method as a first year, because you're competing against so much, you might just have to go for the quantity method, which sucks, but like you just got to like shoot your shot wherever you can. And so I'll speak a little bit more about like the first quality component. And what I mean by this is like only apply to very like few selective firms that you genuinely really want to work at, and like invest all your time and effort into like polishing your resume such that it suits that firm and what they're looking for, and spend all your time like connecting and networking with people who work at that company. Because if you like 10 firms, there's no way that you can like create quality contacts with all 10 of these firms. You're gonna have to pick and choose. And so I think the best method here is like really invest your time into like one particular firm, speak to people at that firm, like really develop your connection there, and like that will enable you to get the interview because the whole recruitment team knows you. And so even though you may not have the strongest resume, they know you're like a good person, and so they'll put you forward that way. After that, your experiences don't matter because you just need to stick the interview.
Exactly. Yeah.
On the flip side, there's like the quantity method, which is like not preferable, but literally apply to like every job you freaking see. And the reason why is like a big chunk of like getting an internship and getting an interview at a good company is like luck. Yeah. And it's like always like slightly fluky. You never know if you're just applying to a bunch of jobs that like maybe this one in particular, like they have a certain set of like different like computer identifiers that they'll screen resumes for. And so your resume will finally get through. Right?
Yeah.
So like you don't always know. It's just honestly difficult. And like honestly, the quantity method sucks. And I think to some degree, like you do need to develop some type of quality connection at that particular firm. Maybe it's just one person instead of like 3 for the quality method.
Yeah.
But like the quantity really does help when you like just like spam your resume everywhere.
Yeah. Speaking of like getting really good first year internships, one of my friends, Chloe, I feel like she's always like so ahead of the curve. Like in first year, she went to this campus recruitment event for Scotiabank.
Yeah.
And I think Scotiabank is one of the few firms in Canada that actually actively hires first year students compared to the other ones. She like went to a campus event, spoke to the recruiter, and the recruiter just gave her like an interview, and then she landed the interview and then got the role.
Yeah.
And then in second year, she got KPMG consulting, and I think she just also went to an event and did a lot of networking. And then in third year, she like did like some Bain early hire program. I'm like, this girl's always like getting the best internships by going to these like early career programs and these little like things. And I'm like, how do people like find these things? It's actually so interesting.
Honestly, this is another terrible case of target school. I worked at EY in my second year summer. And I think one thing that really helped me, even though I didn't network for it, was because I like did the EY challenge in first year. But that's because the EY challenge was really heavily promoted towards Queen students.
Yeah.
Such that like basically the EY challenge will have a chapter of the challenge at every university. That is their target school. So like U of T has an EY challenge chapter. Queen's University has an EY challenge chapter. So does Western. But like if you're not a target school, you like I can say like Humber does not have an EY challenge chapter. So like being a target school does help in that regard.
Speaking of your EY consulting internship, let's move on to talk about, the recruitment process of how you got it in second year. Tell us like what mindset that you were in going into applying for EY.
Yeah, honestly, I think going into applying for EY, I probably made a really big mistake, which is when I applied, I didn't start case prepping immediately after. Basically, when you receive the actual interview offer to when your actual interview is, that is not enough time for you to actually be interview case prepped ready. The minute, or maybe even before applications open, you actually have to start case prepping. Whereas like for me, when I applied for like my EY consulting internship, I applied and I was like, I'll just wait to hear back and then I'll see how the interview goes. But I got the interview offer and they gave me like dead ass 3 days before my actual interview.
Sometimes it's like they don't even give you a week. And it's like, this is the time, like you're going to be interviewing.
Yeah, I've heard of instances where like, especially in like finance or PE, where your interview's the next day. And they want you to like spend the whole day.
Oh my God. One of my friends, he recruited for Evercore in New York.
Yeah.
And they gave him like a 2-day notice. They're like, you're going to fly to New York on this day. Like my friend, he had like an exam literally the day after, couldn't study, had to pack his bag, fly to New York and like do the whole thing. Like stay in a hotel, like do like a full day of super day. I'm like, that is crazy how like these firms are just like they give you so little time. Like you got to be ready.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to consulting.
Yeah.
So like, as you mentioned, you actually didn't like prep that much, which is, I'm actually surprised because you are part of all these consulting clubs at Queen's.
Yeah.
So I feel like you should like know what's going on.
Yeah,
right?
In theory I should. I think it's like not that, it's bigger now, but before it wasn't a very big thing to like do consulting in your second year summer. Everyone's like, oh, you'll do it in your third year summer and then you'll like go full time.
True.
I think because like no one else of my friends was also doing like consulting case prep or consulting recruitment, I like didn't know that was a thing. And obviously I'd never done a consulting internship before in my first year, that I didn't know that's how like the recruitment process went. It only was like I submitted my application, like a week went by, and then I get my interview offer, and I get it on like a Saturday morning for like the Monday morning. Oh. And I see it and it's like a case interview. I'm like, you're joking. I didn't even know it was going to be a case interview. Oh. And so I was there at a conference at that time, like a full day case competition that I couldn't even case prep for. So I essentially had one day to case prep for my like Monday case interview.
Walk us through the timeline of like, yes, you got the notification and then what happened afterwards?
So I got the interview offer on Saturday morning, dead ass, like in the middle of this competition. So I was running the competition at that time. So I wasn't one of the participants, luckily. But I was literally like, I think I was like bringing a case team to their room, and I got an email from EY that's like, you're invited to an interview on Monday morning. And it was literally like 9 a.m. So I was definitely the earliest time slot. And that competition ended at 10 p.m. So I was like, okay, well, today's a write-off. I can't do anything to prep. But really luckily at that time, like, an alumni at the event I was just speaking to, she actually worked in like Big Four consulting for like the same division or like the same equivalent division at a different Big Four company.
Okay, it's so good.
Yeah, so like all the stars aligned that I was like, oh my God, like I actually just got an interview invite and I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do. And she's like, just text me and we'll figure something out. Mm-hmm. And so the morning after, she sat down with me for like 2 hours, walked me through like how to do a case. She sent me like a 10-page PDF of like, this is everything you'll need to know for this interview. Just like dead set memorize all of these like frameworks, memorize all these key terms that you need to know, and just like, you're just gonna have to go into the interview. And so before my actual interview on Monday, I think I got 2 cases in. And so my interview was my 3rd case, which is like not an ideal situation. And so, yeah, it just took a lot of stress.
Did it go well, the interviews?
Well, I got the job, and I got the 2nd round. So luckily that...
Karen's like, duh, like, why are you asking?
No, so there was 4 rounds of interviews for that job. Only the first round was a case interview, luckily. But I was very lucky that the interview structure was interviewer led.
Oh, okay.
It was mainly just like knowing content and being able to like effectively communicate that. But like, I think if you're actually gunning for like a real like management consulting interview, like give yourself at least 2 weeks to case prep.
Speaking of case prep.
Yes.
How much case prep should you do to be ready for any consulting interview?
I honestly think it ranges depending on like the type of consulting and maybe even the firm. Because for example, there's some firms that do like group case interviews. And in that case, it's like a case competition. Like you can't prep for that.
Yes.
It depends on the firm. But I would say for like general like management consulting, I think there's no golden number. Honestly, it's like when you feel that's right. But I believe the goal, like not a golden number, but typically...
There's no golden number, but it is.
There's no golden number, but typically people do around 25 to 45 cases, I would say. That means like maybe give yourself 2 months just so you're not trying to cram like 30 cases in the span of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're generally going to go for consulting recruitment and you know like the general timelines, like for example, I know that consulting timelines are in June and I want to apply. So then I'll start prepping at like the beginning of May. And so like just work backwards, I would say, and like give yourself around 2 months so that you could like work your way towards recruitment, but not like dead set fully like have to like grind and be super stressed.
Yeah. And like who should you case prep with? Because I heard like don't just case prep with like your friends or like people that you know. It's like you gotta like there's like a few level of people that you should like reach out to. And,
yeah,
like, case prep.
I would say that there's 3 levels of people to case prep with. One is your friends. Second of which are like upper years that you know that have the positions that you want, like work at these firms. And last of which is working professionals, which I would say never start with them. Leave them for the very, very end because they have an impact on you getting the job. You probably do not want to fumble with them. I would argue like do not case with a working professional until you are actually interview ready. And the reason I say that is because like you're low-key kind of trying to impress them. And so you can't do that if you like are fresh out of the womb, you just started casing.
Yeah.
So I would say like only start with like case with working professionals when you feel to some degree that you're pretty good at casing. But I would say your first case should not be with your friends. And the reason why is like it's kind of like the case of the blind leading the blind.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah.
So like if you don't know how to case prep and you like prep with your friend who just started case prepping, they don't know how to case prep either. Like they'll give you bad advice. Like they'll probably lead you down the wrong way. They actually don't even know how to give a case. Like it's a case of the blind leading the blind. So I would say always do your first case with an upper year who like has landed at the firm, like who works, like has gone through the whole recruitment process, who you are quite comfortable with. And
yes, comfortable being really important because you're kind of really vulnerable in that situation. You're like, I don't know what's going on and all that. Yeah.
The way it works is like when you start casing, you kind of just have to rip the band-aid off. Like you are gonna be like holy fuck, like really terrible when you start casing. Like it's so normal that you're just gonna be like, you're probably gonna take like an hour, like or 45 minutes frolicking around. Like you might cry. like
what do I do here now? And they're like, okay, give me your framework. What is the framework?
Yeah, like you probably like do not know like what the general process of the case
fumble
is.
all the math.
Or you're just like I remember when I was doing my first case, I was just like, oh, like what's a Kager? Like I literally would have like stop and be like, okay, I'm so sorry, but like what does this word mean?
Yeah.
And like you can only do that when you're with someone who you're quite comfortable with. And also like you're going to receive a lot of feedback when you do your first case.
Yes.
And so do it from someone who like understands you and knows like, hey, this is how Karen takes feedback best. Like this is how I learn best. And because I did my first case with like a friend that I was really comfortable with, who like already worked at Bain and like knew all this stuff, like it really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say like always do your first case with an upper year that can give you general guidance, and then like alternate between like maybe like 3 to 5 cases with your friends who are also case prepping, and then like a case with an upper year. And then maybe I would say around like the 15 to 20 cases mark, when you're like comfortable with casing, you're pretty good, that's when I would start like reining in like working professionals. Mm-hmm. And ideally during this like whole stretch of like 25 to 45 interviews, you also hit the interview timeline, because you want to like hit a peak when you're case prepping, where like if you do any more cases, it's probably just diminishing returns and you just start sounding robotic. But like you'll know when you hit a peak where you're like enjoying casing, you're like really problem solving, and you're like actually
you're just in the zone. Yeah,
you're in the zone when you case, and you're not like a robot. Because once you hit robot speak, like you should stop casing, like don't do any more. You're probably gonna like really jeopardize yourself. And so like you want to like ideally hit this peak when the interviews hit too. And so that's why it's all about working backwards.
Yeah, it's kind of like what is that sport called, like pole vaulting or whatever? It's like you're like prepping, and then
I guess
the final interview is like your like final jump and you make it over.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of. And you want to align your like case prep such that it aligns with the interview timeline.
Exactly.
Because if you've already hit diminishing returns and you're going down, and then the interviews hit, like that's not really good.
Or if you like hit that point, but then the interview is like in a month, it's like what do I do like between now and then?
Yeah, and you can't really like backtrack either, so it gets really difficult.
Oh my god, so many like intricacies involved. You have to like know so much.
Yeah. So it's honestly about managing yourself too. Like if you are at a point where you're like, hey, I'm getting really like burnt out from case prep, you should probably stop, because then if you are like experiencing that burnout when you're actually doing interviews,
that is so bad.
Yeah, like you're like a robot. You're tired during the actual interview. Like it's not a great look.
Also, I feel like case prep takes so many brain cells. Like you're actually thinking so much, and there's actually a lot of pressure. I feel like
there definitely is a lot of pressure, and it's also like a big time commitment. So I think like one advice that I give to a lot of students, especially if they're like considering consulting recruiting, is like, hey, like I wouldn't go through the process or start case prepping unless you're like actually committed to like case prepping. And the reason why I say that is because if you don't like invest 100% to like doing the cases and like actually like case prepping, like it'll show and it'll be reflective during your interviews, and you'll be significantly less successful. So like why invest like 50% and like become unsuccessful at the end, versus like just don't invest at all and just like not do it, versus like invest 100% and like likely see success at the end. But you also still need to care a lot about your personal and mental well-being. And like this is not me trying to be all preachy, but it's also like if you're tired and like you haven't eaten well and you haven't like slept well and you're doing your interview, like your performance is gonna be like severely jeopardized. And so like I think a big thing of like people, at least I've seen like a lot of my friends who've gone through case prep, like they kind of like starve themselves. They kind of like
starve themselves,
or like they don't spend enough time like taking care of themselves. Like as in they'll skip meals to like do a case.
Right, because I feel like when you eat too much, like your brain's like you're in a food coma, so you can't
okay,
case.
I don't know about that, but like as in like for example, like they have their lunchtime for like work, and like instead of like eating lunch, they'll like just do a case instead.
That is so intense.
Yeah, so like because that's when you're free, and that's when you're like
interview. Oh, right,
is probably also free. And so instead of like you eating lunch during your lunch break, you're doing a case. So then when are you gonna eat lunch? I'll just skip it, right? And so like I think it's really normal that like you like skip meals, or like you cut sleep because you're like trying to like get ready for interviews, but like that affects you like mentally, physically, and I think it really like deteriorates your ability to perform well on actual interview day.
That's why I feel like sometimes it's so important to know what you truly want in life and like what do you
Yeah.
really care about instead of maybe like following in the footsteps of other people. I think one maybe negative of being in these very like overachiever clubs is that everybody sort of has like the same goal. And sometimes you might get peer pressured into like doing something even though you might not actually want it deep down for yourself. Like, okay, like everybody wants to do this is so prestigious, it makes a lot of money,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna do it. But I think like you really need to also make sure that it is what you want and that you do want to invest that much
Yeah.
into it. Or else I think if you don't get it, it's gonna be so heartbreaking for you and you're gonna feel like you wasted like so much of your life.
Exactly. And I think that like why would you like put yourself through something that you're not gonna like invest actual time and effort into? And so I think that's like a really big component.
Before we move on, is there anything else that you feel like is interesting about your working at EY in second year?
I actually was recruiting when I worked at EY. So like I was honestly really tapped out of working at EY. So that was a big thing too. I think a lot of people when they are like doing like recruitment, because it's accelerated, so it basically happens during the summer, you kind of have to blow off your second year internship to try to like potentially land at the second one. And so second year summers typically, if you are doing MBB consulting, is a really big overall task in terms of like it's like a really big ask because you're trying to like navigate work while you're also trying to like
recruit for like this really like very intense process.
Yeah, and you're trying to get a return offer too, probably.
Yeah. For people that don't know, essentially MBB recruitment for third year starts at the beginning of second year summer.
Yes.
So like you're starting probably your first corporate job and you're trying to make a good impression, but you're also doing like case prep and like going through very intense like super days and like interviews.
Yeah, exactly. Simultaneously. So like there's a lot of people who like report sick or like those times to try to like just get time off work to interview. And like these interviews are like quite long too. Like McKinsey interviews are an hour long. You'll do 5 of them. You're trying to like get a lot of time off work while like simultaneously like doing like actually trying to get a return offer at work. And so it's like really like a juggling act. Yeah. Because like beyond that, like not only does MBB recruit during like June and July, Kearney and OW recruit during August, and you're probably still working in August too.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god, they're all like okay. It's kind of good that they're spread out, but it's also not good if you want to recruit for all of them.
Yeah, but actually, I think that in the States, OW recruits first before MBB.
Oh, okay.
And that happens during the school time, but it happens during exam season. And so like you're always doing like if you're going to do recruiting, you're always doing a juggling act between like the most core component of school versus like your peak internship time.
Yeah, I think that's what Chloe was doing. Like she was doing interviews for Bain and McKinsey while she was like doing like final exam for like finance and like other stuff. I'm like, girl, like, are you okay?
Yeah, I had like friends that were like that too, and literally they just like I'm going to tank my GPA, because like at the end of the day, if you already got an interview for these firms, you might as well invest your time into the firm and then getting those jobs, because the reason why you want your GPA so high is to get into these firms.
Exactly.
So yeah, like I also had a friend that was doing that, and it was a very stressful period. It's also like really stressful when you're in second year, and like depending on where you work, like I worked at like Big Four Consulting, you can't say you're recruiting.
It's so awkward.
And so like you're trying to like basically recruit for like the same job but at a different firm.
At a better firm.
Yeah, at a better firm, but not telling anyone.
Yeah. Everybody does this, but like nobody like wants to like openly admit it or like tell their boss or like whatever.
Yeah, it's like pretty like general consensus that like likely at least one of your interns are also like going through the process. You just like typically don't say anything. And you also don't know whether or not other people are going through the process. Some people make it like explicitly clear, but like if other people are like going through the process too, like most people will not want to say it.
Yeah.
And if there is someone who like, for example, I had like fellow interns when I was at EY who their plan was to stay at EY full time, I can't be like, oh, I'm trying my best to leave EY.
It's just such a weird dynamic to be in, I feel like.
Yeah. So it's honestly like about reading the room and like balancing your own situation and like just yourself, like how public do you want this to be too? And just like navigating that. So it's a little bit difficult, but it is a juggling act.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we move on to third year summer. So in second year summer, you recruited for Oliver Wyman.
Yes.
And we'll get into it. But first, I want to talk about your marketing internship at Pepsi.
Yes.
I feel like when I was looking at your LinkedIn, that was such like an outlier moment because everything else was like so consulting. And there was just like one like marketing internship. I was like, what is going on here? But
yeah. I think the reason why I wanted to work, like I suddenly worked at Pepsi marketing amongst like all the other consulting stuff I did, was because I know I mentioned to you, like when I was going into university, I still like thought about high school, like I thought about how like in high school I wanted to do marketing, and I never did marketing before. I just decided to do consulting.
Just get it out of your system.
Yeah, so I did that internship just to like try marketing, to be like, hey, I've done consulting, like I know I like it. Do I actually like marketing? And so I just wanted to like shoot my shot just to try it. I think I realized that marketing was not for me. No hate to it. Like I think people like, there's definitely people who like are built for it, who enjoy it. But I think like just like goal wise, it was like something different than what I wanted. A lot of the people that worked at Pepsi and worked at Pepsi marketing, they were typically people who like for reference, when I first started in September, like I had our marketing wide meeting. And literally at this marketing wide meeting, we started off with celebrating the fact that 7 people got married that summer in the department, which is a lot of people in like a 50 people department.
Yeah.
And it was like 7 people got married all throughout the summer. And I think that just shows you like the stage of life a lot of people are in.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are at Pepsi marketing were there to like settle down, and like maybe less to settle down, but like start families. Like they want to be grounded and stay there. Whereas like a lot of people in consulting are like people who are like always looking to learn and like upward trajectory, as in like where to go next. And like these get people who like, I'm gonna go to Dubai now and like do like social impact in Dubai, or like I'm gonna go get my MBA. Like these are people who like don't like to be like feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think like for me, like starting off, I definitely wanted to be more like that. Like as in like I wanted to travel, like I wanted to experience so many things. Like I don't know if consulting would be the end goal, but it's definitely like a starting point. And I think that's why that's like especially what I learned when I spent my time at Pepsi.
So what you just said brought up another memory, which is that one of my friend who used to work in consulting mentioned that people who work in consulting are essentially confused overachievers. Typically they have really high GPAs, like in school, they're like overachievers essentially, but they're not really sure what they want to do exactly, and they want to explore the options. So after graduating from a prestigious school, they want to go into something that's equally prestigious, that's going to set them up well in life. So, you know, like MBB Consulting or like Tier 2 or like these other really good firms.
Yeah.
And it's like a few more years for them to sort of still be in that safe environment of, you know, being surrounded by other overachievers, but also exploring different like options in life and then exiting afterwards.
Yeah, basically like that. Like I've heard a lot of people in consulting who are like, oh, like it's like a jobless job.
Yeah.
Or like it's like a cop-out option if you don't want to choose an actual career. And I think that's like quite true to some regard, in the sense of like you're doing so many like random things. And I think the reason why a lot of people choose consulting is because of like the glamorous like exit opportunities that they have. Like you spend so like your first 2 years basically working really intensely in like a variety of industries and a variety of like different tasks. Like you could be working in strategy, you could be working in operations, you could be doing finance, like you could be doing marketing for this company. Like you get so much exposure to different industries and like so many different like different like job functions basically, that like when you finally decide to like, hey, I want to actually pursue like CPG marketing, that like because you've gotten so much exposure, you are able to like consciously make that decision that like you've tried so many industries and that is the industry that you chose. So you like don't go to bed knowing that you never tried anything else.
It's like a like essentially like 2 times speed, like trial and error process.
Yeah, exactly. But also you start off much faster and higher than the rest of your friends.
Yes. Oh like, my god, that's sort of faster and higher than you.
Yeah, like as in like basically like.
But it's true, but yeah.
Yeah, like CPG and marketing is really slow. Like you essentially is like one thing that's great about consulting is like there's an automatic, like not automatic, but like you get promoted by time, and it doesn't matter how many people are in that like your starting year. Like you get promoted basically on merit. You're doing good. You've hit your like 2-year mark. Let's promote you to like, depending on what firm, consultant. Right? Let's promote you to associate level now, right? Versus like in marketing, you're basically waiting for your manager to leave so you could take their spot. And so like sometimes in like really like old school like CPG firms, you could be sitting in the same position for like 20 years before like your director leaves and you can now finally jump from manager to director role. But yeah, exactly. But versus when you're in consulting, you try out so many industries and like maybe you could specialize later, but like because you've gotten so much exposure and like everyone knows about like how fast-paced the learning environment is in consulting, when you finally decide to exit consulting after like 3 to 5 years, you typically jump like a title higher than a lot of your like peers that started in marketing. Maybe that's just an example.
In the fall of your third year, you were doing a full-time internship at Pepsi, but you were also doing full-time school and also working part-time as a TA. So there's a lot of things on your plate. How did you balance and juggle everything?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people want to do this. They want everything. They want to do an internship, they want to do school, they want to make money.
Yeah.
But so few people manage to actually do it. So what's the secret?
Okay. I'll give a little bit of like a cleansed answer, and then I'll give like tag on some like reality to it. But I think that like, yeah, I was very lucky to be able to like do everything at once. Like obviously worked full time at Pepsi. I did school. And then I was also like a TA, and then I was also on my clubs too, which was also a lot of work.
Yes.
But I think one thing that like really helped me to juggle everything, I think this is twofold. I think one is like, I like live religiously off of like Outlook calendar. I genuinely like, scheduled everything in. Like if I was gonna like watch like a movie with my sisters, I'm like put it in my calendar, or else I'm not hanging out with you.
I'm sending you an invite.
No, I actually send invites for like everything. Like everyone like knows like, oh, Karen's gonna send an invite now. I send an invite for everything, and so the only way honestly to juggle so many things at once and like manage your time, because if you split it up, like you're like 40 hours for work and then like another like let's say 20 to 30 hours for school, like that's a lot to juggle, right? That's like over full-time workload. And so like the only way to really like do it is like to time block all your time. And so I really like leveraged a lot of my like legit tools like Outlook calendar, like note taking, etc.
To-do list.
To do everything. But secondly, I think it's like having really good friends. And what I mean by this is like, it's normal to have like friends for like different purposes. And like, I'm not saying like use your friends, but as in like have your friends that you can like lock in and study with. Have your friends that you can like, you may never work with ever, but you love to hang out with them and you'll always go like hang like bowling with them, clubbing with them, etc. And I think for me, it was really good to have like a set of friends that I knew if I fell behind in terms of school, I could always rely on. And that really helped me to navigate like school with work.
Like a support system.
Yeah, essentially a support system. And I think that's like probably the biggest thing that helped get through it. But also like just note that if you're going to like juggle so many things at once, where you know that like humanly it's not that great to time box all of that, you have to be willing to give something up. And what I mean by this is like, I definitely say like my sleep was probably less than average during that period. I also like saw a lot of my friends less because I was working in person at Pepsi, and like obviously
you just don't have enough time.
Exactly. And my school was 3 hours away in terms of drive. And so like I would have to like make a legit effort every month to like drive down 3 hours to like go see my friends while everyone else was on campus, and then like drive back next Monday morning to like go to work. And so it's something that like you consciously have to like try to do, and you have to be willing to give something up. And like, so for me, I was willing to give up like that time that I would have spent in person with my friends and like probably like partying to like go and try to pursue all of these things. But I think I was also like very well positioned to do something like this. And what I mean by that is like I did IB in high school. And
so you have the credits.
I had a lot of transfer credits, which I cashed in during that semester. And so instead of doing like the full 5 to 6 courses, that was a full load, I only had to take 3.
I was like, girl, there's no way she's doing 6, because I'm doing 2 courses right now in the summer. You have to make sure that they're after like 5 so that you can like do them realistically. And the only reason why I took 3 courses was because that's what I needed to like still be a full-time student, because under 3 courses you're no longer a full-time student. And so I just did the minimum to like meet the requirements, and I made them all online courses. So smart.
And then like TA gave me a lot of flexibility where I knew the prof quite well, and so they let me grade remotely. All the stars aligned for me. It was also the first year that they were trying like a digital grading system. Before, you would have to like physically go in person to the school and mark all the exams in person.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, and you could not leave the school. Versus like now, like last year they started with like a new like QR code scanning system that let me like grade remotely. And so a lot of the stars aligned that enabled me to like do what I did. And like Pepsi had a hybrid work model at the time, which I think now is like a full in-person work model. And so all the stars aligned that like let me like work remotely, do school remotely, grade remotely, that I was able to do so much.
But still, must have been a lot to juggle.
Definitely.
But anyways, if you're listening and you also want to do school, an internship, and something else at the same time, like you mentioned, the 2 tips are: number 1, use time management tools like Outlook, to-do list, And then second, have a support system for yourself.
Yeah, and I think build the right support system too. Like it's really normal again to have friends for social purposes, for academic purposes, for career purposes. Like I think a really good analogy that my friend actually did is that you will have like beer friends, wine friends, and water friends. And what I mean by this is like your beer friends are people that you can sit down, grab a beer with, hang out with.
Yes.
Right? Your wine friends are people that you're like a little classier. Like these are like probably like career or like, you know, job oriented friends.
Like networking.
Yeah, networking. Like people that you'll like catch up with once like in a while that like are wine friends. And then you'll have your water friends who are just good for anything.
I was like, wait, are they just like really bland or like like you have to like drink water, so you have to do?
Yeah, they're just like good for any occasion.
Okay.
Yeah, and so like it's really normal to have like groups of friends for different purposes.
For example, when you case prep, you need a lot of like wine friends.
Wine friends, yeah. And then when you're done case prepping, you need a lot of beer friends. But throughout that process, you should also have water friends, which are like, because case prepping is honestly like a really rigorous thing. A big piece of advice I always give to like students who are like pursuing consulting recruiting is like case with like your friends, but case with like good friends. And what I mean by this is like really positive and fun people, because like the case prep process is already like really draining, really rigorous. And so like you don't want to do it with someone where like you're casing for 2 hours, you case them, they case you, and you're like really drained at the end. Versus like if you case with someone who's like really funny and really fun, then like you're gonna like laugh while case prepping, and at the end you're probably gonna like go get ice cream or something.
And it's like positive association with case prep.
Exactly. It really does help. No, but honestly, like it's the case prep process could be made very unbearable if you're with the wrong people, but could be made very fun if you're with the right people. And so like me and my friend, when we case prep, we would always like yap and case prep for 2 hours and then like just go hang out.
It's kind of like a hangout session if you think about it, if you make it.
And it makes it so much easier because you're already like really tired from case prep and like juggling so many of these things with like work. Like you just came home from a, like 9 to 5, a long work day. You probably don't want to like be like feeling like it's a meeting again, right? You want to like have friends that you can hang out with, like just like unwind, and like doing it with the right people makes a really big difference. Or you could even be the fun, happy person to make case prep a little bit more exciting.
Like you don't have to take it so seriously.
Yeah.